welcome back to the Spector Creative channel, where we look at all things pop culture, mainly toys, but also movies and TV shows and radio dramas and, Betamax. Today, I'm making a follow-up video about change. And no, I don't mean coins, I mean when things are different from other things. I recently made a video talking about, specifically about the Masters of the Universe brand and how change has always been a part of it. Now, change can be a good thing. Things can change from one form to another, and it's part of either life cycle or it makes it better. And knowing the difference between sort of the old way and the new way is really about understanding a brand. When I made the video specifically about Masters of the Universe, which you can see linked here, I wasn't implying that change is good or bad. I was just noting that the brand Masters of the Universe He-Man has had lots of change. As an example, the very first time He-Man ever appeared, this is what he looked like. He was a barbarian who just literally, stepped out of his jungle tribe to go defeat evil. And obviously, he and the brand have changed a lot over the years. There are 2 brand new Masters of the Universe shows coming to Netflix, and, this He-Man in armor with a giant gold sword does not look anything like that Tarzan-esque warrior we saw in the previous image. So, they could even be seen as 2 completely different properties in a sense. So, just as, fundamental background, yes, things change, but it's not always good or bad. And that's what I want to address, is when is change in a property good, and when is it not so good? Is it worth changing things just for the sake of change, or really, more appropriately, when in a property's lifespan is change more acceptable? So that's really the core of the argument. And I'm going to examine a few different things in pop culture that have undergone change, some well-known, some less well-known. And I want to really look at when they are changed, and not just what is the motivation for that change, but based on the lifespan of the property and when the change happens. So let's look at an example of a good change. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, depending on book or movie, right? Well, you've got Willy Wonka and you've got his orange-skinned Oompa Loompas. Well, it's a little-known, well-known fact that the Oompa Loompas in the original version, in the book, they were pygmy black Africans that Willy Wonka more or less enslaved and took by force to work in his chocolate factory in order to entrap Augustus Gloop. Now, this was something that was changed. It happened very early on in the lifespan of the property, looking at Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as a property, much like Star Wars or Masters of the Universe or Babylon 5. And no one really even remembers, except for the internet, which never forgets, that the Oompa Loompas started off as black slaves and not the orange-skinned, fun-singing guys. Other changes, like what's happening with Masters of the Universe right now, is happening much later in the property. It's happening 40 years in. And this is when changes are a little bit more controversial. So when I made the previous video about change, I wasn't endorsing the changes that are happening with the property right now. I was just explaining that the property has gone through a lot of change. And this is yet another one. If it's good or bad, that's sort of up to the viewer. And you can pretty much clearly tell what changes are good or bad versus based on the audience reaction. So let's look at kind of the most infamous one in pop culture, when Han Solo faces off against his Rhodian best buddy or worst enemy in the Star Wars cantina. Greedo versus Han, right? The whole who shot first debate. So for those of you who've been living under a rock, Greedo shoots first in the special edition, but the original intent that George Lucas wanted was for him to have always shot first, starting in 1977. But he couldn't get that shot. That was in the script, and that's what George Lucas meant to do, but in the course of filmmaking, which is a very organic art form and a collaborative art form where multiple artists are coming together to make the final product. So another example is George Lucas intended to have a scene in Docking Bay 94 with a giant monster Jabba the Hutt, where he had an Irish gentleman standing in for what would later be Jabba the Hutt. In the special edition in 1997, Jabba was CGI'd into the scene, because this was his intent, was to have this scene. Now, when you are changing art, and film is an art, it really is about when that change takes place. The Willy Wonka change happened very early on and was probably, arguably, for the right reasons. It was a children's book, and having a children's book about the main character enslaving his workers is probably not a good idea. But when you make a change late in the property, after it's already been beloved by an audience, and that change actually alters a character's identity and who they are, that's when you run into an issue. And that's when a change, in my mind, doesn't work. And it's not just about the character's identity, but it's also because a good character has an arc. They start off as one thing, they become another at the end. And good movies, good books, good content usually follows a very templated arc for a character. And Han Solo is a great example of a character having an arc over 3 different films. He starts off as a gunslinger who will basically shoot down anyone for hire and take money for, whatever job he can, whether he's more, I bet you knew there was not something more than you than money. I mean, Princess Leia's, lines about him taking money from the rebellion. So that's how he starts in the film, as a money-hungry gunslinger. Where he ends in Return of the Jedi is volunteering to lead a mission against the Empire on Endor. So that's his arc, is going from one thing to another. And the whole Greedo shooting first, it takes away from Han Solo's story arc. He's no longer seen as the guy who'll do anything for money, who'll shoot, a Rodian down in cold blood just to, get out of there. It actually fundamentally changes the character. His arc in the trilogy is changed by this scene. Now, I'm just using Star Wars as an example. There's tons of movies that have been remade, had adjustments made to them. Some are more well-known than others. And really the question at the end of the day is about the ownership of art. When does an artist stop owning the art they create? Obviously, if they sell it to someone, well, that person becomes the owner and the art is theirs. But art that is, if you will, in the public domain, like take the Mona Lisa for an example. If Leonardo's descendants wanted to come along and add a mustache to her, do they have the rights to do that? Do you have the ability to change art once it's already, if you will, had a fandom? So there are fans of the Mona Lisa. And if the Mona Lisa was changed in pretty much any way, you would probably have very upset art fans, because the Mona Lisa has been around for hundreds of years and has a very devout fan following. It's the most viewed piece of art in the world. And if you changed it, you would have fans that no longer feel like it's what they fell in love with. So that's really when change is either good or bad, how art is viewed. When art has a fandom and it's already been fallen in love with, that and how long a property has had in existence are the determining factors of when change is good, change is bad, and change can be ugly. I hope you enjoyed this look at changes made to pop culture and artwork, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I always answer back. Give me a subscription, a like, a bell ring, all those things tell YouTube to share this with more people. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.